Woman, an in-depth exploration of the world of women today with Samantha Dean.
Good evening. Tonight we're going to be taking a look at the older woman's world. We're also going to be talking about ageism, a word which is coined by one of our guests here tonight, Dorothy Tennov. Dorothy is a feminist and an associate professor of psychology at the University of Bridgeport, Connecticut. Also with us tonight is Peggy Nevin. She is director of the Adult Advisement Center at the State University of New York, Buffalo. There's no question about it. This is a youth-oriented society that we live in. Now, do you, as older women, and I use the term advisedly, do you feel discriminated against in any way?
I feel discriminated against as a woman because I have read the statistics. I have always, actually almost until recently in some ways, felt very discriminated against because of age, or rather I have felt that people who wanted to discriminate against me often used age as a method.
Now, where does this discrimination come from?
Well, as much as I am concerned about older people and older women and myself, I think we must recognize the degree of discrimination that takes place toward younger people. And I feel that much of my earlier years were, if not totally wasted, at least not what they might have been, because people were able to discount me, and I see it happening to younger women all the time around me, through this process of ageism, which is discrimination against a person on the basis of age.
So it works both ways.
It certainly works both ways, right.
Peggy, do you feel discriminated against at all?
Personally?
Yes.
Yes, at cocktail parties I don't see any clusters of men around me, or on the bathing beach I feel pretty inadequate these days.
Does this worry you?
No, not entirely. I don't ever remember that I had great clusters of men around me in my courting days.
I'm sure you've been very modest.
You know, Dorothy has set me thinking about ageism as far as young people go. I feel very strongly that some of our university students are discriminated against. I see them at the border going back and forth to Canada, how differently they're treated with their long hair and casual clothes, and my husband and I, who are such square, middle-class, sober-looking citizens, we're never treated that way, no matter what we're taking across. I see evidences of this. I see also sometimes we give very flip answers to children who are really quite intelligent, making bright and intuitive and very, sensitive remarks on things and how we put them down. I hadn't thought of this as ageism, Dorothy. You're raising my consciousness.
What is ageism exactly? Would you like to define it?
Well,
Dorothy?
sexism means that the most important thing about the person, the first thing you think of about them is in terms of their sex. And racism, you see race first. And ageism, you see age first. And you expect certain things of certain ages. And your view is biased. We're talking about prejudice. It was really brought home to me when I tested a 5-year-old boy quite a few years ago. He tested 170 IQ.
Wow, that shake you up?
Yes, I tested my own 5-year-old at the same time. The interesting thing was he had been getting into a lot of difficulty with teachers. He was not acting the way a 5-year-old is supposed to act. He wasn't interested in playing with the children. He was listening to the teacher's conversation and they thought he was fresh and all this sort of thing. And I think that's ageism. Mm-hmm. I also think it's ageism when a 6-year-old boy won't play with 5-year-old boys, or a 17-year-old, will not go out with. I've seen this a lot with my adolescent sons. I'm a 9th grader. I will have nothing to do with the 8th graders.
I notice, though, even within the women's movement, which is not primarily a young women's movement, I mean, there's proportionately just as many older women. You have found it necessary to form OWL, Older Women's Liberation. Now, isn't this a manifestation of a discrimination which must be felt?
Well, now, I have never been a member of OWL. I was invited and very honored to be invited by them to give a talk, and the talk that I chose to give was ageism. And the fact of the existence of that organization also led to my thinking about ageism. Now, I'm not sure how OWL came to be formed, but I think that one of the things that was true was that it was hard for the older women to feel comfortable around the younger women, and that it did go both ways, and that the older women enjoyed having, knowing that I think the younger women, especially in New York City, were more assertive. Outside New York City, I find more older women in the women's movement, but in the urban center, there were a lot of very active, very vocal young women, kind of edging the older women out.
Is it harder for a man to grow old, no, I guess it's not gracefully, but are things harder for a man than they are for a woman, do you think?
Well, I think the thing that's harder for a man is if he is retired or fired before he is able to be, before he wants to be. But I think everything else is harder for a woman.
You do.
How about in the job market? Do you find there is more discrimination between young women and older women than there would be between young men and older men?
An older woman is not of any value in this society. And as evidence of that, we women, most of us, try very hard to preserve the semblance of youth. We use cosmetics, we use plastic surgery, we lie about our age. When I was 33 years old, I looked in the mirror and I said, there it is, 33. It's the first 33-year-old woman I've ever seen. And I had no idea what 40. I knew people who were 19 and 20, and I knew of women who were 70. Nobody in between would admit her age, which made it very hard, makes it very hard for us. And in fact, a woman clings to that youthful look until, she can't any longer. And even then she tries. But now, you see, this doesn't happen to a man. He
And
can
why
be
is that?
40. He's young at 40.
That is if he's making money.
Well,
Or if
he's young
producing
at 40.
an interesting
Yeah.
person.
I would say if he receives discrimination that has to do with his job, then that's a problem. But he does not. The sexes are different that way.
I don't like that. That worries me. I know that men do have problems getting older. I'm aware of that in my work in the Adult Advisement Center. But what really miffs me, Dorothy? Older men can marry young women. We think it's perfectly fine. I don't think it's perfectly fine, but it's not frowned on. But let one of my 50-year-old friends go out with a 39-year-old man, and what is said? Why isn't this all right?
Right.
We outlive men. That is, we white women outlive white men by 7 years. It's pretty rough if you're an American Indian.
In fact, if I may quote myself, I say the cultural taboos against an older woman and a younger man are so strong that they're comparable to the strength of taboo against incest. In fact, I think many people think of it as a kind of incestuous relationship.
We also seem to have a different standard of beauty for men and for women, whereas when a man ages and he gets lines and clefts in his face, this is all giving character and integrity and strength to his appearance. When this happens to a woman, it's a very different story altogether.
But that runs very deep. That's because men are considered, they are valued for their thoughts, for their contribution, for their wisdom. Now, generally speaking, what are women valued for?
I think, Dorothy, though I'm going to get your book and read it, I wouldn't bear to, be able to miss something this good. But I think men feel like surplus people, too, if they're not earning money.
Well, let's
If
not
they're
make
really
this a male versus female,
No.
because there isn't an argument here. I'm not suggesting that men don't feel badly about getting old and all of that. I'm saying that the society does respond differently to a woman and to a man. A man at 45 can be very valued, and in fact, he's considered young.
That's
a
right.
woman at 45 is not considered young. Now, men have problems too, but the way we have structured the sex roles so differently, and as long as they are so differently structured, the problems will be a little different. The man is very, very pressured to produce, and when he can no longer produce, he suffers much more than the woman who hasn't been so pressured.
I'm aware of that. I'm aware of their anxiety when they desire to change jobs or when indeed they have to look for another job and prepare for a new career. The anxiety on the part of a man seems so much greater than it is, in my experience at least, with women.
What has been your experience with women in your professional capacity? What are some of the most common fears, hang-ups of women as they approach this age?
I think the threat of a fractured marriage is a very real one. We all know what the divorce figures are, and American marriage has been in trouble for a long time. And when a woman realizes she can be replaced by a younger woman, and you know, in this day of zero population, the cult of zero population, when a woman has been a home woman, done maybe a good job, been a good mother, good community worker and so forth, she begins to wonder if she's wasted her life. What has it all been for?
Mm-hmm. This is the empty nest syndrome.
Right. Well, it's more than that. It's really, now that motherhood is not in favor, apple pie is fattening, you know, they're really, what is there to believe in that she's done?
But you ever see, or hopefully sometimes you see the positive side of that picture, where the woman who has got all the childbearing years, you know, is finished with all this, has now the emotional, the physical, the mental freedom to expand and go into new avenues and so on.
And this is where
Yes.
she meets job discrimination, and she meets the problem of not having kept herself her hand in, so that at the very minimum she suffers severe underemployment. And
This
this
is true.
this is the problem. And in fact, a woman who has, to the degree that a woman has identified herself not with home and husband but with her career, I think she will be equally upset at retirement, or at losing a job as the man, or at least, you know, it will be much more like him than the woman. So there are different kinds of problems, and the problems are because our sex roles have been woman stay home, take care of the children, and that's all that society defined as her function, and it isn't enough.
That's right. Well, the high cost of having children. This means a long interrupted working career, or her academic life has been interrupted. When she attempts to re-enter the labor market, what can she do? Maybe she can type a little bit. But a woman who is, she's wise, she's sophisticated, she's worldly, she's done a lot of reading, she's done valuable and significant volunteer work. But our work at the center, we really work hard with these women to try to equate some of their skills to employable skills. This is a very difficult problem.
Is it hard for a woman in her middle years to get job training and to start in a new field?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. We find most of the women who come to us want, of course, some of the offerings of the university, either in credit-free programs for upgrading or retraining, or to enrich her experience a little bit, maybe a chance to take some psychology courses she's never had before, or to indeed start college. And we help them to do this. They make very good students. Our mature students have wonderful records at the university. It's quite heartening. This is encouraging when they know how very successful our mature students have been. It's a real problem.
What is the implication, do you think, in the social security field, where a woman gets a pension at, what, 62 is it, and a man gets a pension at 65? What are we being told there?
It's a reflection of the unequal opportunities that women and men have had, and I think it's terrible. I think the unequal opportunities are terrible. That we must find ways to bridge the situation so that a woman is not left like this with all of these very often the experiences she has as a homemaker for whatever number of years are not irrelevant. They are just discounted. She's been living and learning and thinking and very often reading. And I think this is one of the reasons why women do so well when they get back in school, because their minds haven't necessarily been dead at all. I've been working with older women too in the classroom, in non-credit and in credit courses.
Isn't
and
it a
do
joy
very
to
well.
teach older people?
And I have many of them
Just
among
love
my
these
friends
classes.
too, and they really are very interested. But they're held back, the job market. And I mean, if these same women with the skills, and very often these are cultural skills too. In other words, they may come from years of reading newspapers, engaging perhaps in civic work and volunteer work of various kinds, which I don't recommend and I don't advocate. I really think we've had enough of it. But the fact is that if these women were suddenly transformed overnight into men, they could walk into executive jobs considering, not all of them, of course, but many that I've known, that they have trouble getting into a department store job.
I look at volunteer work differently. We use volunteer work deliberately for career exploration, to structure, to schedule, and we really, I'm working with agencies to put some beef into volunteering opportunities so that these skills can be equated with employable skills, and so that women can not waste their time and be used as paraprofessional people with wisdom and insight and really a lot of human skills here. We really hope women will continue to do volunteer work and to involve their families. Some of the things we're working with, our projects in Buffalo that involve whole families are new and exciting. They have to do with transitional services for people coming from one institution out, you know, either mental or drug problems or having been in prison, something like this, where families can serve. And also VisTech, volunteers in service to Erie County with our social welfare departments. This is a wonderful thing.
Well, I really think we live in a wealthy enough country that we don't have to have women or men doing volunteer work when it is serviceable. It is not valued by employers, and the person should be compensated. And I really think that women have just gone down the line of the trail of volunteer work until you know, to a point where they've really been taken by it.
It's a very unfortunate thing that in a materialistic society you do equate the value of the work that a person does with its monetary recompense. But why have things got this bad? I mean, where a condition is so intense, do you think that there is a certain amount of inertia, apathy on the part of women in their middle years? I mean, is this part and parcel of getting older?
I think I would disagree with Dorothy, because my experience is that our women are finding jobs every day. I know there are no jobs in the Niagara Frontier, but our people are finding jobs every day.
But
and it is
the norm?
equating.
Is this widespread, or is this a special situation?
I think, from what I see from centers on university campuses across the country, that people are coming back. It's a great effort. You may not come back as at a level as high as you would have.
You see, I
but
think
they
the
are getting
distinction
jobs,
here is you're
right.
thinking of people getting jobs, and I'm thinking of people getting appropriate jobs, appropriate to who they are and what their level
Right.
is. And I think underemployment is a very painful thing. I think when a person has the capability of being a journalist and is instead waiting on tables, that this is a tragedy.
Well, I would agree with that too. But
So
we are
you see,
finding
this is the
professional
problem.
and paraprofessional
It's good that you
jobs.
have that program. We have a program of non-credit courses, and that's working well too. And there is nothing about happening to women in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and even 60s that I see them going downhill. But they're very, very capable. And it's the opportunities that aren't there.
No, I didn't mean to imply that they weren't capable, but I just wondered, if such is the case, you get a little defeatist about it and you don't fight it perhaps as much as you would
Well,
otherwise.
there's certainly your defeatist. When people come into our group advisement situations, their self-image is very poor. Their confidence is gone. They really feel like surplus people.
Very often,
It really is a confidence-raising operation.
Right.
Really it is.
But you very often find that when a man climbs the executive ladder, he becomes a pillar of the community. And when a woman does the same thing, she's
What?
accused of
She
being,
climbs the executive where?
well, wherever she can, if she's fortunate enough. But then
Yes.
she's accused of copping out and selling out on her family. And, everyone says, well, pity her poor husband.
Or being
There's this
excessively
kind of
aggressive, yes.
double standard
Yes.
which exists too.
Dorothy, why is it, do you think, people are afraid to be referred to as middle-aged or to consider themselves middle-aged? What is it about middle-age that...
Well, for one thing, it's downhill after that. I mean, I'm just conjecturing. If it's a youth-dominated society, that would logically follow. There are certainly developmental changes that aren't all that pleasant, and so I think the obvious being reminded of the nearness of the end, and it's just getting nearer the older that you get. These things are quite undeniable. I mean,
What is
but
middle
it's-
age?
The
What-
excessive things bother me. you know, it's defined very differently by different people. I think
Yeah.
I have a feeling 50s, 60s is what a lot of people think of as middle age.
How do you
50s
define
and
it?
60s. Well, I'll go along with the crowd. I don't have a special definition. I remember one young man that I knew. Oh, I said young man. He was 35, and he was very.
I see what you mean by middle age, Dorothy.
Well, he said, I'm really upset. I'm 35 years old. I'm going downhill from now on. He was defining himself at that time as middle-aged. And actually, in his case, it was perhaps a little more sensible in some sense. As a nuclear physicist, one does tend to do one's greater work when one is younger. But he was thinking in terms of the lifespan of 70 and 35 is the middle. It's the mathematically middle age. That's what you expect from a mathematician, physicist. So, but I think, I mean, let me ask you as much as me. I think if I had to choose one age that was middle age, what I think people would think of is something like 56. How about that?
Mm-hmm.
That sort of age is.
Good enough. Near
But
enough.
it seemed 40 when I was 20, so or
There's
closer
also
to 40 anyway.
another unfortunate thing that struck me is women supposedly come into their prime as far as sexuality is concerned in their 30s. Few years after that, they're considered over the hill, so they have a very short term of
It's very short.
eligibility.
I understand a woman is at her height at 34 and she's over the hill at 35. And I remember those few months.
Gosh, I wish someone
spend
had
most of my time
told
looking
me.
in the mirror. Fortunately, I read it. I was so glad. It's certainly
Do you
true.
think advertising, the media and so on has a lot to do with perpetuating and emphasizing the youth cult and depicting middle-aged people in perhaps less favorable lights?
And not ever showing pictures of older women, except that they're funny, they're a joke.
Or they're sick.
Or, yeah.
I've
That
read
we
it.
see this
Or
face
cleaning our dental, our dentures, or something
again
of
and
the sort,
again and
you know.
again, and it's the
Right.
same face
Mhm.
with the same eyelashes and the same indeterminate age that could be, it's indeterminate, it could be either 19 or 25. But sure, we see this. But you do see older men in ads, but not very old. I mean, as you say, it's a youth-dominated culture. And not all cultures are youth-dominated. Some are age-revering cultures.
Yes. In Japan, the older people are very revered, aren't they, and considered to have accrued so much wisdom and experience that they should be respected and put up on a pedestal.
But we shouldn't fail to mention the Grey Panthers and Maggie Kuhn.
Now, what are the Grey Panthers?
Maggie is a 76-year-old woman who, with some other women, it's not and men, have organized what she radically calls the Grey Panthers. And she says things like, I'm proud of my wrinkles. I am not complimented when you tell me that I look younger than I am. I am 76, and that's how old I am, and I've lived that long, and I want to get respect for that, so on and so forth.
And what exactly are the Grey Panthers? What do they do? What's their claim to fame?
Well, those are Maggie Kuhn and the others who
Are they radical?
who are asserting themselves. Well, I think it's a pretty radical statement for a woman to say, I'm 76 and I'm proud of my wrinkles. And I think in
What are
that
they
sense,
working
you
on?
see.
Legislation to increase
Yes,
old age
yes,
benefits
yes. and
Medicare
extending
and so forth.
retirements. I think our
Mhm.
retirements are far too early. Really, they're very, very early for both men and women.
Is there any indication that there will be more
Particularly women.
flexibility in retirement plans, do you think, so that some of us can retire at 50 and some at 70? Some of
Yeah.
us should retire at 20.
And be able to choose our retirement and have
Mhm.
it depend on things other than age. You see, too much depends on age. Having 18 be the legal age is an example of ageism. There are other criteria that could be used. There are criteria of intelligence, and we put all children into school at the same age. We retire
Mhm.
everyone at the
That's
same
right.
age. And this is very discriminatory because it doesn't take into account the unique characteristics of the person.
Do you foresee a time when it could be individualized, perhaps?
Let's organize.
Let's.
I think we certainly have to, we have to make those changes by working for them.
Mhm. Sometimes, though, older people tend to use their position as a power base. I think you were saying something to this effect earlier on, that they say, look at me, this is the voice of experience. And of course, this is very alienating like in sexism, women have got to give up those little prerogatives, those little courtesies which they expect from men, perhaps, if they are to find true equality. This presumably has got to be the case with ageism too.
Yeah, I really felt very oppressed as a young woman by people who would tell me, you look younger than you are.
It was just a put down, wasn't it?
It was just a put down. They were saying to me, I'm not ready to include you as one of the adult group. And it was a put down. And I think it's important that we recognize that. And it hurts me when I see people do it to other people, too.
But there are ways our older people can be a comfort and a strength to us with their assurance that they've lived through it. And it's great to have a good mix in a group or among your friends. Deliberately seek older people.
Yes, I think so. And I think we have to watch for the instances of ageism. Not long ago, I was a speaker at a workshop, and a man was assigned, an optician was assigned to introduce me. And I think that when he came into the room and saw who he had to introduce, I think he felt just a little bit that his position was higher than that. Well, he stood up and told the audience that he was glad to see that we have a really interesting young lady to speak to him, to the group today. That was less than a year ago, and I got really angry, and I said, I'm not young, and I'm not a lady, and shocked the audience, but I think they understood.
What about these slogans like life begins at 40?
Yes, that very ageist. That's a peculiar one too, because I'm not sure whether what it's putting down, but I know it's ageist, or fat and 40, or over the hill. Or
Life Begins at 40 was written, 20 years ago. I think the son, that was Walter Pitkin's book, I think, and I think his son wrote one, Life Begins at 50. I don't know, I think life goes on. I like Golda Meir's statement in the Ms. Mag, mine came yesterday, it's in the mail. She was talking about, frankly, about being in her 70s and about facing death. And she said something that I think we all say, or at least feel, her fear of senility. This is what she really fears. She doesn't fear aging anymore, but the decay of a useful person, to watch someone's brain deteriorate. This is the sad thing. This is what she fears. But she says aging is like being in an airplane in a storm. You ride it out. That's where you are, and that's what you do.
Very good. Peggy,
Wonderful woman.
Dorothy, thank you both very much indeed. Good night. We'll see you again next week.